your mom's dead. Just hang on, listen to me for just a second, okay? Your boyfriend's in here, okay?
Oh, he's here. I don't tell lies. I would never hurt my mom.
Okay.
No, seriously, I would never hurt her.
Listen to me.
My mom and I are best friends.
Listen to me.
I didn't do anything.
Listen to me. Why?
Would you like me to start from the beginning? She and I were having relationship problems. She didn't really like my boyfriend.
What you need to know is that Gypsy told us everything.
I did actually stab him, I will admit.
So Gypsy knew you were going to do it because Gypsy asked you to.
Yes.
I'm free physically, but I'm not free from the trauma. I'm reprogramming myself, and it takes a minute. I don't think I'm like my mother at all. I try actively not to be.
I want to start off with saying things are not always as they appear.
It just proves that happy endings are not just in fairy tales, they're real and true in real life also.
Is murder ever justified?
Hey everyone, this is Gypsy. I'm finally free. I just want to send a quick video to thank everyone for the massive amount of support that I've been getting on social media. Everyone has been really, really nice and supportive, and I really appreciate that. It's nice to be home. I'm back home in Louisiana, enjoying a beautiful day outside, and I've got a lot of great things happening really soon. I've got my documentary series coming out, The Prison Confessions of Gypsy Rose Blanchard. I just put out an ebook that I'm super proud of. It's not a rehashing of everything that happened. It's more of my reflection of everything that I've learned and experienced in the last 8.5 years. So my ebook is called Release: Conversations on the Eve of Freedom, which you can pre-order now. And again, just thank you guys for all the support, and keep watching. Okay, bye.
Hello, and welcome back to another episode of True Crime Producer. I'm your host, Chantal. So today we're taking a look at the very complicated, detailed, and now quite infamous story that is Gypsy Rose Blanchard. So let's take a deep dive. So Gypsy Rose grew up with her mom, Dee Dee Blanchard. And to the outside world, everything looked great. It looked like a happy family. Perhaps one would even say that they had an admirable relationship. From the time that she was a baby, Gypsy was told that she had a huge number of medical issues, resulting in dire diagnoses and lots of medical interventions. The person that told Gypsy that she had these medical issues was her mother, and often her mother and these diagnoses were backed up by actual doctors in a hospital, but it always seemed to stem from her mother initially. The truth was, Gypsy was not unwell. Her mom was lying, and psychiatrists believe this was because of a mental disorder called Munchausen's by proxy. So this is a mental disorder when parents feel the need to lie about their children and illnesses that their children have. And this can be for a number of reasons, but most often it's seen to be done for attention, really. Attention and sympathy. Here are some examples of the illnesses that Dee Dee told people Gypsy had. First one, and one of the more major ones, leukemia. So Gypsy grew up thinking that she had cancer. Muscular dystrophy, and due to this muscular dystrophy, she needed to use a wheelchair. Seizures, asthma, hearing and visual impairments. So due to these medical conditions, she underwent a number of medical procedures, including having her salivary glands removed. Her teeth were pulled out later on after they started rotting, possibly because of some of the medications that she was on, and also possibly because of the salivary glands being removed, which again did not need to happen. So just to paint a picture for you, there is a young girl growing up in a single-parent household where her mother is constantly babying her, looking after her, and telling everybody that she is unwell, while Gypsy for sure thinks that she might have some of these illnesses, but also knows that she doesn't have to use a wheelchair. And later on, we find out that would often be yelled at by her mother when she was caught walking around and not being in her wheelchair. And this is because her mother wanted to keep up the facade that Gypsy was incredibly ill, and not just, a flu or temporary illness, that she was, for the rest of her life, medically impaired and physically impaired.
Was there a time between when you first were put in a wheelchair and June of 2015 that you figured out that you really didn't need to be in a wheelchair?
Yes.
When was that?
I always knew that I didn't need the wheelchair
And how did you know that?
because I could walk.
So Dee Dee went to lengths to hide the reality from family and friends. So from the minute Gypsy could talk, Dee Dee told her, "You are not allowed to volunteer information when we go into doctor's offices." She would always say, "Let me lead and you can sit there, but do not volunteer information yourself." Again, creating this reality where Dee Dee somehow knows everything that her daughter is going through, knows her symptoms. It's also important to note here that Dee Dee did have a little bit of a medical background herself, so she was able to describe symptoms that clearly lined up with a particular disorder, and probably knew some trigger words as well that would get doctors and nurses more alerted to some kind of illness. Dee Dee was also very charming, and she was personable, and she came across as somebody who loved her daughter desperately and wanted nothing but the best for her. She came across as somebody who was willing to sacrifice anything to be able to take care of her daughter. So, of course, doctors and nurses and the rest of the outside world, they're going to be sympathetic to any kind of mother who is either hurting for her child, or a mother who seems to have given up a lot for the well-being of a child, particularly one that is unwell. So you're probably wondering how Dee Dee was able to get away with this. How was she able to convince doctors and nurses and friends of everything? Well, there was one key move that she did. She claimed to be a victim of Hurricane Katrina, which explained why all of Gypsy's, or many of Gypsy's medical records had gone missing, because they had been lost in the hurricane. So in 2008, Dee Dee and Gypsy moved into a now pretty infamous house that was built by Habitat for Humanity. It had this big wheelchair ramp in order for Gypsy to get up and down. It was painted pink. You've probably seen images of it.
I have an awesome bathtub. It's a jacuzzi tub meant for my muscles. And we have a wonderful ramp.
It's so easy to live here, and it's so peaceful.
It really kind of, the juxtaposition of what the outside of the house looked like versus what was going on inside of it is one of the more interesting and kind of dark elements of the story. So along with this house, they also got a number of charity-sponsored visits to places like Disney World and to concerts. So this is another interesting part of Munchausen's by proxy, is the physical gifts that you can get, or the trips that you can get by claiming to have an unwell child. I don't think that many people are motivated by this and only this. The stress and chaos and pain of having to keep up a child's fake illness doesn't seem in any way to equate to what, few trips and gifts somebody might get from it. I think it's a much more psychological need for attention and desire for perhaps even pity from other people. Eventually, a doctor did come to suspect that Dee Dee was lying, and that she had Munchausen's by proxy, and that Gypsy was a terrible victim at the hands of her mother. However, he never reported anything to the authorities, and this is because he said he felt like there wasn't enough evidence to back it up, and that there wasn't anything he could do. Later, an anonymous report was made to the authorities claiming that, again, Dee Dee was lying and that Gypsy was a victim. However, when the authorities went to visit Dee Dee, she convinced them that absolutely nothing was wrong, that she was telling the truth, that she would never lie about anything like that. And I think it's natural to want to believe somebody who's telling you those things, because the claims do sound almost outrageous. Munchausen by proxy is not a new mental disorder by any means, but it is rare. We don't see it happen very often. However, the older Gypsy got, the more difficult it was to control her. Obviously, Gypsy was growing up. She was turning into a young woman. She had desires and she wanted to be free. And Dee Dee, while she wished that her daughter had the mental capacity of a child, knew that she did it. So she even tried to lie about Gypsy's age, going as far as altering her birth certificate to say that Gypsy was much younger than she was. Gypsy had a goal, which was to get out and to be free. And finally, Gypsy did get desperate. At one point, she ran away with a man that she met at a science fiction convention, but Dee Dee found them and told him that Gypsy was only a minor at that time, when in fact she was 19 years old. So again, just using lies and manipulation and any tactic that she could to make sure she had the utmost control over her daughter. Finally, Gypsy was able to get online again. Now, this is where things really took a turn. Online, she joined a Christian dating website and met somebody named Nicholas Godejohn. So Nicholas was in his 30s by the time he was talking to Gypsy. And Gypsy told him that the only way they could ever be together was if her mother, Dee Dee, was dead. So in June of 2015, Nicholas showed up at their house and stabbed Dee Dee to death while Gypsy was in the next room. And Gypsy and Nicholas were both found later at his place in Wisconsin. Gypsy had posted a couple of things on Facebook that had alerted authorities to the situation, one of which was saying, "The bitch is dead," which makes it pretty obvious that she was at least involved in the crime. So what's been really interesting to read about has been the adjustment that Gypsy's had to go through since the death of her mother. She ultimately ended up going to prison for this, and she said that she felt like she had more freedom in prison than she ever had living with her mother. She's also come to realize that a lot of things that she thought were normal just simply were not normal. For example, when she was younger, she would have to have baths a lot with her grandfather, and at one point even had baths with her mother and her grandfather at the same time. It took prison for her to realize that this wasn't normal behavior. She thought that this is something that everybody did with their close family members. Her mom would even go so far as to shave Gypsy's private parts because she told her that this is what made somebody clean, and she wanted to clean Gypsy. So teaching her that because her body was changing and she was becoming a young woman, she was in some way dirty and unclean. At this point, you might be wondering what happened to Nicholas Godejohn. So in 2018, he was found guilty of first-degree murder and armed criminal action. So this equates to life in prison without the possibility of parole, plus an additional 25 years for armed criminal action. So when this happened, a lot of people were upset by it, which is understandable. I can see why it would be difficult to wrap your head around the fact that Gypsy, someone who clearly orchestrated the murder of her mother, got, I think it was in total 8 years in prison. It seems unfair that Nicholas was the one who actually did the physical action of killing Dee Dee, but was convinced and truly, it seems, truly believed that the only way he could rescue the woman that he loved from abuse and torture was by taking actions into his own hands. And also the fact that Gypsy asked him point blank to do this, to murder her mother.
Who talked you into killing your mother?
I did. I talked him into it. I supplied the knife.
Where did you get the knife?
I stole it from Walmart.
Plan A, B, and C, correct?
Yes, sir.
And the decision to murder your mom was always the last resort, correct?
Yes, sir.
But the murder was referred to as Plan B, right?
Yes, sir.
So A, B, and C kind of are a little out of order. Is that fair?
That is correct.
Okay, so A is try to get mom to like defendant. correct?
That is correct.
And then C would be try to get you pregnant.
Yes, sir.
And you discussed those alternative plans with the defendant, correct?
Yes, sir.
And you discussed the fact that murdering your mom would be a last resort. You discussed that fact with the defendant.
Yes, sir.
Because you both knew that was a serious thing.
Yes, sir.
And the defendant knew that as well.
Yes.
At least he communicated that to you.
Yes.
Well, Gypsy can get 8 years for that, but he gets a lifetime in prison plus more. And I think that's one of the more controversial parts of this case. What do you think? Do you think that that is fair? Do you think she should have gotten more, or that Nicholas should not be locked away in prison for the rest of his life? It's hard because, yeah, he did technically kill Gypsy's mom. He was the one that held the knife. But at the same time, he felt like he was helping Gypsy, which honestly he was. There's no question about it that Gypsy was abused, that she was trapped in a hellhole with her mother, Dee Dee. And Nicholas came along and got her out of it pretty quickly.
I mean, due to all the publicity Gypsy's getting, and she's getting me that publicity too, I feel like I have a responsibility. I feel like I have to be somewhat of a role model. And because of that, that's part of the reason why I feel like I have something to basically owe up to, basically. I mean, I do have restitution to pay to the society, which of course I'll be happy to do. But at the same time, I want to basically let everyone know that I'm not just this cold killer that doesn't have any feelings or anything else like that. I'm a human being. And as they say, human beings make mistakes.
What do you think about that? Is that fair? Is that an ethical response? I'm personally a little bit torn on it. I can see both points of view. I think it's very clear that Gypsy was failed, though, by the system and felt like she had to take matters into her own hands. And by her own hands, I mean actually Nicholas's hands. It's also come out recently that Gypsy thinks that Nicholas is guilty of more than just murder. She said this in a recent interview. She says that Nicholas agreed to murder her mother because his alter ego was a 500-year-old vampire. She said he asked if he could rape Dee Dee after doing the deed, and Gypsy refused, she alleged. She says, because I didn't let him rape my mother, I had to agree to let him rape me. After Nick killed my mother, he told me to get in my bedroom and take off all the stuffed animals that were on my bed. I knew he was going to have sex with me. Never once was it a fantasy to me. When I yelled stop, he didn't. I called for my mother. So that's obviously incredibly dark and might shift the public's opinion on the whole Nicholas spending his life in prison while Gypsy gets off scot-free. I think initially Nicholas was kind of portrayed as this very caring, perhaps not all there figure who was just trying to do a great act of service and love for his girlfriend and was willing to spend the rest of his life paying for it. But since these new comments have come out for Gypsy, there might be a public shift in opinion towards Nick, I would imagine. You might have seen it by now, but Nicholas and Gypsy did not end up together, actually. Gypsy is now out of prison and she is married. She's attending events with her new husband, whose name is Ryan Scott Anderson, and they appear to be very in love and very happy. As a matter of fact, Ryan proposed on just his third visit to Gypsy in prison. So obviously the Gypsy story is really complicated. There's a lot of gray area there. She grew up heavily abused and in a world where her perception of reality was completely different from everybody else's. So a question she gets asked all the time is, if you were in a wheelchair and you didn't need it, why didn't you just get up and walk away instead of orchestrating the murder of your mother? And her response to that is that she simply didn't know she could do that. She was scared. She was scared living with her mother after being chained to a bed and her laptop smashed for running away with a boy. The last thing she thought she could do was stand up in public and expose her mother. Just imagine what her mother would have been capable of doing to her had Gypsy done something like that. So I completely empathize with Gypsy there and can see how she would feel too frightened to publicly out her mother. She says now she realizes that murder was definitely not the only way out, that there were a number of other steps that could have been taken, but she also realizes that she was living in a fake world, if you will, something that just was not reflective of reality at all.
Did you and your mother obtain any kind of advantage by you being in a wheelchair?
Yes, sir.
What kind of advantage did you obtain?
Financial, attention, charity.
Financially mean money.
Yes, sir.
Did you obtain money as a result of you being in a wheelchair?
Yes, sir.
How did that work out? How did that happen?
Judge, I'm going to object to the relevance of that. There's been no connection that the defendant knew any of this.
Well, I'm assuming, Ms. Perry, you're going to tie this up.
Well, right now. Did you and Nick ever talk about the fact that you didn't need to be in a wheelchair?
Yes.
Did you ever talk to him about why you were required to be in a wheelchair?
Yes.
I'll overrule the objection.
Could you tell the jury why it is that you obtained money as a result of being in a wheelchair?
Because people felt sorry for me.
Gypsy also says that sometimes she does miss her mom. She knows that her mom was abusive and toxic towards her, but also recognizes she was suffering from a serious mental illness. I think for Gypsy to have this reaction is incredibly mature and forgiving and speaks volumes about Gypsy as a person. I like to think that I would maybe be able to react the same way, but if I had been subjected to a lifetime of abuse and made to lie only to come out of it and realize everything my caretaker had told me was false, I think it would be incredibly difficult to find forgiveness the way that Gypsy seems to have done. Okay, so what is she up to now? So since Gypsy's been released, she came out of prison to millions of followers on Instagram. The day that this is being filmed, she's at a whopping 9 million followers on Instagram, which is a number that few can boast about.
Hey everyone, so this is my outfit of the day. Everything is Zara, my top, my shorts, my shoes, and my makeup was done by the lovely Miss Isabel. So I think I look pretty cute.
And her husband, like I said, seem to be very much in love and enjoying their alone time. They've made some very funny comments about such alone time online already. And, you know, to round it out, she stated that she's very sick of talking about her past and that she wants nothing more than to be able to just close that chapter and look forward. So we wish her nothing but the best. She's obviously had an incredibly challenging and difficult life, and hopefully it's up from here. So that is it for us today. Thank you so much for joining us. I'm your host, Chantal. See you next time.